is Jen Kiaba. I am coming to you from my second week of COVID self-quarantine, and I'm going to try to bring you at least weekly walkthroughs, inspiration, etc. from the perspective of creativity and art. And today I wanted to walk you through one of my newer pieces, and I say newer with hesitation because it's a newly created piece, but it is created from old things that I've shot. And I want to talk to you about it from the perspective of struggle, because I think that very few artists really share the behind the scenes of how hard it is to create something. So even when I've done a behind the scenes or a speed edit or even a walkthrough, I might mention like, yeah, this was really hard. I really struggled with it, but I don't know that I've ever laid bare like, this is how I struggled to get to the final product. I've even shared like, yeah, I'm still struggling with this being the final product. But today what I wanted to do is walk you through this piece that I've created because it has been something that I have attempted to make come to fruition since 2014. So we're talking about 6 years now. I think I've made multiple attempts at this image, and it's kind of gone through different iterations of what it needed to be. And I think I'm happy with where it has come, and I'm certainly happy to let it rest for now. But I thought that this process, sharing this process with you would be helpful because a lot of times when I watch other artists, I see their final products, or even when I see them talk about their editing process, I think that like, man, this must be so easy for them, even though I know it's not. You know, they can say that it's not, but until we really say like, this is the path that I followed to get here, oftentimes what I do is when I'm struggling, I think like, oh man, I must really suck because I'm struggling. And I think that it's really important to let everybody know that the struggles are normal and you don't suck because you're struggling, and sometimes something needs to be tabled until you're ready to reapproach it. And so that is what I hope to be able to address in today's video. So let's jump into it after that very long introduction. So this is the piece. I'm mostly happy with it, and I think that that's probably just the perfectionist perspective that I come from. It's really hard for me to let a piece alone, and I have to usually say like, okay, we're done and you don't get to touch it anymore. And actually that's what's so interesting about this image, is that I sort of broke that rule for myself multiple times over the years. So this is actually how it sort of started out. So in 2014, I had shot a piece and I shared this final piece. And I shared the fact that I didn't like it and I was struggling with it, but I didn't know why. Now, there were things about it that I did like. I really liked the gradient, and I liked the way that the dress looked, and I liked some of the movement. But some of the response that I got on social media was that it didn't really make sense from a symbolism perspective. They weren't quite sure what it was that I was trying to say. And this wasn't meant necessarily as criticism, but just sort of the response to me saying like, I don't know if I like this. And people are like, yeah, I can see that there are some things that might be struggled with here. So I'm going to deconstruct this image for you really quickly before I get into how the image evolved. So this image, there's a lot of grunge here, but it started out with me, so remove all the grunge. It started out with me photographing myself multiple times against a blank wall. And so this is, you know, me trying to get this this gradient here to make it look like there was red being sort of pulled up, like, you know how like carnations or cloth will pull liquid up. I was really trying to get that kind of feel with it. And there's like a new head on here too. Let's see if I can find where the head is. There we are. So I don't even know what I was doing here. I was super messy with my masks and things. But this is actually, let me see if I can clean that up even more. Oh my gosh, I'll turn that back on. There's a floating piece somewhere in here, but I won't look for it. This is the original image that I had shot. And again, there were things that I found kind of compelling about it. And when I cleaned it up and found the elbow again, which I don't even know where it went. Obviously my editing has changed since then, and I do a slightly less destructive editing. But there was something compelling about this that I wanted to do something with. And so I want to say maybe last year, I brought it to this point and I screenshotted this. I didn't even save the levels or the layers of it because I knew that this was not really where it needed to be, but this was like the concept. And I wanted to save it and then just like let my brain kind of, I don't know, do whatever it did. And to be honest, I don't have a good reason why I didn't save the layers, other than maybe I was just like, screw it, I can't even deal with it anymore. But I did screenshot it just as like a reminder to myself, like, you wanted to do this. And so some of the things still remain here, where I've got this sort of flowy dress made out of sheer fabric. I've got the color kind of being pulled up the dress. And then the thing that I wanted to do from here to here was to give a reason visually for the color to be pulled up. And so here I was like, okay, I think it should be water. And I really like the idea of like blood in the water and what that connotes, and the things that it can attract. And so, yeah, this was a screenshot. The date on the screenshot says April 2019, so almost a year ago. I did this screenshot and I put it in a folder called in process projects. It's a tongue twister there. Just so that I could return to it again. And a smart thing to do would have been to save this, but I didn't save it. And again, I don't know why. So the next step for me was I got to this point here. And I think that what this is me fighting. And so I will walk you through these layers because I had to stop again here. I couldn't continue with this. It was just like, this felt like this was going to be another failure for this image. So you can see there's a lot of layers here. And I'm not even 100% sure what's happening, but let's just go through it. So I think the biggest thing that I was struggling here with this image was trying to match my colors. So you can see there's these curves layers here where I was trying to get this sense of like integrating the body into the water and into the fog that I've created. So we've got these curves layers trying to manipulate the light. I have a color fill here on color burn, trying to get that look of the cloth pulling up this colored water. And I'm also just, again, fighting with this light here because I'm dropping a figure onto a background where the light is totally different. And so, again, I thought that I might just fail on this. So you can see here, I'm still struggling to like get the light to work, changing my hue and saturation because this is, with this fog, it would have been a very muted kind of place light-wise. And so I wanted to remove some of the saturation in the skin. And then again, just like trying to bring down the contrast. So that's the figure. And then what I also have here is I have stock images that I had pulled off of DeviantArt and Unsplash. And so I don't usually like to use other people's stock, but I thought when I was readdressing this image that I might be able to make it work with other people's stock. And so you can see like I have all of these layers here. So I'm just fighting. Like it's not even really worth like going into how much I was fighting. I was like trying to put ripples in here and look, more ripples, and like playing with the different sizes of the sky and the sea to try to get the horizon correct and stuff like that. I have birds back here because I thought that might help. And then I've got all these like fog layers, and I've got these, this is a gradient here trying to get the water to look right. But you know, at the end of the day, like this is as far as I got, and it just didn't feel right. And so what I did was I walked away for a while. I don't remember how long, maybe a week or two. And I said to myself, you know what, maybe you need to use your own stuff. And so, you know, from a stock perspective. And so I started thinking about other stuff that I had shot. And I remember that I had photographed a friend in the river near my house. And I was like, you know what? I bet that that would be a better water picture for me to use as opposed to all this other stock. And I could even look at that picture to see, like, what does the light look like? What does the contrast look like, to try to make it meld a little better? And so that's how we ended up getting here. So you can see that there's, you know, there's a communication between this sort of stopping point and then this final piece. And so I'm going to walk you through this final piece now, because it's not 100% how I visualized it in my mind. Like, again, if this was my sketch, it definitely evolved from this place. And, you know, like the sense of the red being pulled up the fabric isn't quite what I wanted it to be, but I'm much happier with it. Like, I'm happy enough for it to be like, this is my piece. And so let me just take you through what this actually ended up looking like. So I kept somebody else's sky. I probably could have found a better sky, but the water picture is mine, and then the body from the hips down are actually my friend who is in the water. And the reason that I kept this is because you could actually see her reflection. That was huge. That's a big difference between this and this. Like, there's no sense of the light source here. Whereas here, you know, we can see how the water and the light are interacting with each other. There's actually natural ripples there. And I loved how the fabric was clinging to her body. And so ideally, I would have just had an image of somebody doing this pose in the water. But I still had to fight with this to get it to where I wanted, because I still liked the hand pose and the arms. And so the rest of my edits are really trying to get everything to match, because we can see that the water and the sky do not match right now. The top part of the body and the bottom body do not match either. So you can see this was let me just get rid of that there. So this was the original water that I had started out with in the last image. I put my own water on top of it, and then I darkened the sky. And then I actually brought the saturation of everything down too, because what I really wanted was the color to come from this red in the water. And so I already start playing with the light here. And then I introduced some fog into the image. And I put the birds back in. I don't know why. I just decided that the birds needed to stay, even though you can't really see them at the end. And so then I put the body back on, my top of the body back on. And suddenly, to me, like, this image has come together so much better by removing some of the contrast and some of the color from the bottom half of the body and changing the way that the color works in the water. This is starting to get there. We're not 100% there. And you can see I have a lot of adjustments on the body too. So let me just like turn them all off and turn them back on again, because it wasn't just pasting the body in. You can see that there's a really big difference from where we started. So I brought the levels way down, started manipulating the light with curves, and did some dodging and burning, removed a lot of the saturation, still playing with curves and levels to try to get it so that the light feels flatter. More and more. And this is, to me, is kind of where it almost starts to work. And so you can see it's like 10 layers in where it started to work for me. And then I brought in some more of that, the red. And I mean, I'm looking at this now and I'm like, I could have really like blended the bodies better, but I kind of like how there seems to be a little bit of flowing fabric, maybe some like wet fabric and sheer fabric pieces. So, you know, I decided to let well enough alone. And from here, I started doing more global adjustments. And so I did a curves layer to really bring down my darks, and I pinned my midtones a little bit. And then with levels, I just popped the contrast. And if you've watched my other videos, you know, you can do this in curves, you can do this in levels. Some of them, like curves, can be more fine-tuned. Sometimes I just like to work in one or the other. Here's another curves layer just to bring down the hot spot in the chest. And then another curves layer introducing more of a light source, which tries to make sense of the highlights in the arms. And then a lot of dodging and burning to try to change the light again. And this to me is another spot where like suddenly this starts to feel like it makes a little bit more sense from the perspective of just the way that the body looks in terms of the way that the shadows look, etc. And then I threw a black and white layer on in soft light. And what that does is it creates kind of like an interesting thing with the contrast here. And it starts to make things look quite graphic, which I like. And then I ran this modified action that is called Holgeroid. If you've seen some of my other videos, I talk about it as well. And this is starting to get to be where I start to see some of like my signature color coming through. And then I just bump my contrast a little bit. And then I started playing with the hue and saturation to get my reds to pop. But you can see in the mask, I've masked out the sky so that I'm not getting more saturation in the sky at all. And then here, so this is Alien Skin Exposure. I ran it as a plugin. Again, I talk about this in other videos too. So you can watch that last video that I uploaded last week to hear a little bit more about my thoughts on that. Other than I really like it. I've saved recipes in there that again start to feel like my signature sort of touch to things. And then I again have like bumped up my reds a little bit. Threw on several layers of grunge. You can see I've got all of this grunge in here, including some from Brooke Shaden, others that I've shot over the years. And then another curves. Oh, turn back on. This is a really large file too, by the way, and so it's starting to slow my computer down. So some more curves here and a color fill on color dodge. And then I threw the birds back in, but you can't see them very well. And I've got them on a blur. Can't really see them. And then I just did a couple final adjustments after walking away from this image. So I thought that this was going to be like my final. But what I do is I look at it on a couple of different screens, on like a mobile screen and things, to really see, this is a calibrated monitor, but to see how other monitors see things. And also just like how does it look on social and things when it's the size of a postage stamp. So I came back in and ran a few final adjustments to kind of warm it up a little bit, bring some warmth to the arms, like the skin tone, and make the reds a little orangier. And so this is sort of the final piece, and then this is like my stamped layer on top. And so you can see that this was where I was before. Prior to that, this is where I was. And I started from here, or technically here. And so I wanted to walk you through that so that, again, to kind of bring this back to the beginning, you can see that sometimes an image is a struggle. Sometimes it takes weeks to get an image right. Sometimes they sit on a computer for years before you're ready to bring them to fruition. And so I just wanted to share this with you so that when you're editing, if you're struggling, you don't go to the place that I do in my head where it's like, I am struggling, therefore I must not be good enough. I think that struggle is part of the process, and it's a part of the process that we don't talk about a lot. And so by talking about it, I want to normalize it. And I want to tell you that if you struggle with an image, if you can't get it to where you want it to be, part of that is the growth process. Part of it is we are all learning and we're all improving. And, someday you may have the skills to get it to where you want to be. And I'm not just talking about editing skills. Sometimes it is conceptual skills, right? Sometimes you have an idea in your head and there's something there that you want to say, but it doesn't quite work. And sometimes we can develop crutches around things that have worked in the past. And I think that that's what I was doing here when I had the sheer fabric over the face. There's like too many things happening. She's got something over her face, but there's also this red. Where is it coming from? Why is it there? I knew that I had these symbols that I liked working with, and I was sort of deploying them in like a ham-handed sort of way. And so part of the growth process is refining your voice and refining the way in which you utilize symbols. And then part of it is also developing your voice, developing what you want to say, and developing your ability to edit. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're struggling, it's okay. Sometimes you need to walk away from an image for a week or two. Other times you might need to walk away from an image or revisit an image years later. All of that's okay. The struggle is okay. You can power through and bring it to something that you're happy with for now and share it, but you may want to come back to it later. And there's no wrong answer with it. So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that it's been encouraging for you, whether you've never struggled at all or you're struggling for the first time or you feel like you're always struggling. I just want you to know that I understand. And, I think it's part of the process, and it's a part of the process that's actually quite beautiful because it's a problem-solving part of the process, and it's a fun way to learn and interact with our creativity. So for me, I am going to try to not demonize my struggle so much, and I'm going to try to change the way I think about it. Instead of hearing like, why am I struggling? I must be so bad. Be like, oh, I'm struggling. This is an opportunity to learn and get better, and I'm probably exploring new frontiers. So I would love to hear from you now. Have you struggled with an image before? Have you not been able to complete it? Or has it taken you a lot longer, maybe even years, to complete an image? Let me know. I would love to talk to you about it. And I will see you next time. Bye.